temperature in the Grand Archive dropped 3 degrees in the space of a single breath. The environmental systems hadn't changed. They remained strictly within operational parameters. The cold was coming from inside him. Varrox watched the holographic continent burn, processing a truth he could not unknow. Just as the heavy security door chimed, the human envoy was not scheduled. You will want to hear the rest of this official record. Come back for the conclusion. That same sterile, paralyzing chill. He had first felt it creep into his joints 3 cycles ago, standing in the lower vaults with the smell of ozone thick in his lungs. He was supposed to be indexing agricultural yields. Varrox was a provisional clerk. This meant he received the data packets no one else wanted to touch. His arrival at the Level 9 encrypted terminal had been unremarkable, save for one detail. The automated doors slid open exactly 0.5 seconds before his biometric pad contact. He logged it as a sensor misalignment. That was a highly regrettable error in judgment. The decryption required 3 continuous shifts. The Terran file architecture was a concerning labyrinth of decoy algorithms and false flag corruption protocols. He pushed through them. His transfer out of the subterranean levels depended on clearing this queue, and he desperately needed to see natural sunlight again before his next molting cycle. The hologram activated. Earth records. Pre-FTL. He observed a sequence of conflicts categorized as the World Wars. So the file opens and he is looking at casualty numbers that shouldn't mathematically exist for a surviving species, and he realizes the sterile silence in this room isn't peaceful anymore. The statistics scrolling across the secondary monitor exceeded the total population of 3 adjacent Virian colonies combined. A staggering loss of life over what appeared to be minor territorial disputes. He ran a diagnostic, assuming a baseline metric error. The diagnostic confirmed the data without hesitation. His lower left eye blinked entirely out of sync with his other 3, a severe autonomic failure brought on by cognitive dissonance. The data was accurate. They did this to themselves. He found himself staring at a small scratch on his terminal casing. Someone had made it with a stylus. It was very straight. He focused on that scratch while the primary screen displayed atmospheric incendiaries turning cities to ash. He filed the preliminary threat assessment with digits he could not force to remain still. And for some reason he was intensely furious that the cafeteria had run out of hydration supplements that morning. The translation matrix produced a new term, trial by combat. It meant they used violence to solve legal disputes. No, it meant they considered violence a valid legal metric. He assumed it was a transcription failure. The math was illogical. How does a species expand if its legal disputes are settled by mutual physical destruction? It was adequate for lower life forms, not for space-faring civilizations. He opened a supplementary file on psychological warfare, sleep deprivation, sonic disruption, false information matrices. Varrox laughed. It was a brief, ugly sound in the sterile room. The collective had reviewed these exact tactics during their initial observation of Earth. Adorable. They had actually added them to their children's textbooks as theoretical logic puzzles. Seeing them documented as active, applied strategies against their own genetic kin was significantly less amusing. He stopped laughing. His scales were losing their metallic sheen, dulling to a flat, dead gray. The realization did not arrive gradually. It hit like a kinetic strike. The current Terran diplomatic stance, their peaceful envoys, their polite, measured smiles at the council. It was not a biological baseline. It was an active, heavily reinforced cage. They were choosing to be peaceful. He was about to submit a formal recommendation for planetary quarantine when the access log on his secondary monitor flashed. An entry breach. Someone had entered the archive. The secondary monitor blinked. Unauthorized entry. Varrox stood. His lower digits felt entirely numb. He accessed the internal facility sensors. The visual feed resolved immediately. A single Terran stood in the center of the primary projection room, the envoy. He was supposed to be in the upper diplomatic sector. Varrox reviewed the envoy's transit data, tracking the unauthorized path. The human had bypassed 6 separate biometric checkpoints without triggering a single alarm. He had navigated the archive's defensive perimeter with the exact same mathematical precision their ancestors had used to hide classified data vaults inside Lagrange points. Those invisible regions of space where gravitational forces balance perfectly, turning empty vacuum into an undetectable natural ambush position. They didn't just understand space, they understood blind spots. I should have triggered the facility lockdown. He noticed a smudge on the secondary monitor, a small streak of industrial lubricant. The cleaning drones had clearly missed it during the last rotation cycle. He stared at the smudge for 14 seconds. He did not want to walk into the projection room. I am a provisional clerk. My preferred expertise is indexing agricultural yields. I have no desire to confront a species that weaponizes gravity. He walked to the projection room anyway, because protocol demanded it. The holographic continent still burned in the center of the room. Vorox stepped through the threshold. The human did not turn around, and now the cold was a physical weight in Vorox's chest. The temperature drop hadn't been a malfunction in the environmental controls. It was his own biology initiating pre-shock survival protocols, compressing his internal organs to minimize damage from an anticipated kinetic impact. The envoy watched the pre-FTL footage of his own species turning cities into ash. He was not horrified. He did not look away from the orbital bombardment, rendering a hemisphere uninhabitable. His posture was entirely relaxed, casual. The human turned his head slowly. He looked at Vorox. Earth had a tradition called trial by combat, the envoy said. The translation matrix fed the words directly into Vorox's auditory receptors. His voice carried no threat. That was the terrifying part. It was just a quiet, conversational statement of fact. We haven't forgotten how. Vorox's upper left eye twitched, a severe autonomic failure cascading through his nervous system. The scales along his cranial ridge went completely uniformly gray, the color of dead metal. This was not a diplomat. This was an apex predator wearing a diplomatic uniform merely because the uniform required less energy than a kinetic war. The human smiled. It was a measured, polite expression, a weapon kept deliberately sheathed. Vorox realized then that the humans hadn't outgrown their violent history. They had simply learned to control the blast radius. 6 standard cycles later, Vorox submitted his permanent transfer to the agricultural division. The Terran envoy was long gone, but standing in the new, brightly lit corridor, Vorox hesitated. He watched the simple facility door. It chimed. It slid backward exactly 0.5 seconds before his foot crossed the sensor threshold. It had never been a sensor error. The humans didn't just walk through doors. The architecture itself was yielding to them.